The state of a living space often appears to be a purely physical matter of organization. However, researchers in environmental psychology and sociology observe a deep connection between our surroundings and our internal states. A cluttered or untidy environment is not just an accumulation of objects, it can be an external reflection of complex emotional landscapes. This connection is not universal, and its intensity varies greatly from person to person. One key aspect is the concept of cognitive load. Every object in our field of vision competes for our attention. In a cluttered space, the brain is presented with an overwhelming amount of stimuli. This constant input can make it difficult to focus, relax, or process information effectively. The mind is perpetually distracted, trying to make sense of the visual noise. For some individuals, this can lead to feelings of being overwhelmed or mentally fatigued, even when they are not consciously aware of the cause. The disorganized state of the home becomes a low-level, chronic stressor, subtly draining mental resources that would otherwise be available for other tasks and thoughts. Mess can also be linked to emotions of the past. Objects often carry sentimental value, acting as physical reminders of people, events, or phases of life. A stack of old letters, a child's outgrown toys, or inherited items from a family member can be difficult to part with. This attachment isn't just about the object itself, but about the fear of losing the memories or identity associated with it. When these items accumulate without a designated place, they contribute to clutter. The inability to let go of these objects can signal unresolved feelings or a strong attachment to a past that feels safer or happier than the present. The home becomes a museum of personal history, but one without curation, where every item demands emotional space. Furthermore, a disorderly environment can sometimes be related to feelings about the future. Procrastination is a common factor in why messes accumulate. People might delay tidying up because the task feels too large, or they do not know where to start. This avoidance can stem from decision fatigue. The sheer number of choices involved in organizing can be paralyzing. Where does this item belong? Should I keep it or discard it? This indecision can be rooted in anxiety about making the wrong choice. The mess then becomes a physical manifestation of this paralysis. A standstill between a past that hasn't been processed and a future that feels too daunting to plan for. The clutter represents postponed decisions and a sense of being stuck. The state of one's home is also tied to social expectations and personal identity. Many cultures associate a clean and orderly home with responsibility, success, and control. When a person's living space doesn't meet these perceived standards, it can trigger feelings of shame, embarrassment, or inadequacy. They might avoid inviting guests over, leading to social isolation. This creates a cycle. The mess leads to feelings of shame, and the shame makes it harder to seek help or find the motivation to address the mess. The physical clutter becomes intertwined with emotional burdens of guilt and self-criticism, reinforcing a negative self-image. The home, which should be a private sanctuary, can feel like a visible symbol of personal failure. For some individuals, mess can also serve as a protective barrier. A cluttered and chaotic environment can be a way to keep others at a distance, both physically and emotionally. It creates a space that is difficult for others to enter or feel comfortable in. This might be a subconscious strategy for people who have experienced trauma or feel vulnerable, using the physical disarray as a shield. The mess acts as a buffer against the outside world, a fortress of belongings where the individual feels a sense of control, however chaotic it may appear to an outsider. In this context, the disorder is not a sign of neglect, but a form of self-preservation. Life transitions also play a significant role. Events like the birth of a child, the loss of a loved one, a new job, a move, or a period of illness can disrupt routines and consume emotional energy. During these times, maintaining an orderly home often becomes a low priority. The resulting mess is a direct consequence of shifting priorities and limited capacity. It's a temporary state reflecting a period of adjustment. The physical environment simply mirrors the internal upheaval, and as life stabilizes, the ability to manage the home environment often returns. In these cases, the mess is not a character flaw, but an indicator of a life in flux. It's also observed that creativity and mess can sometimes coexist. For certain creative processes, a degree of physical disorder can be stimulating. A desk covered in books, papers, and tools might represent a mind actively engaged in exploration and connection making. In these scenarios, the mess is not a source of stress, but a functional part of the creative workflow. The organization is mental, not necessarily physical. However, there is a distinction between a productive, creative chaos and a clutter that impedes function and well-being. The emotional response is key. If the environment supports activity and feels energizing, it is experienced differently from a space that feels oppressive and stagnant. The concept of clutter blindness is another factor. Over time, people can become so accustomed to their surroundings that they no longer consciously register the mess. The items become part of the background, and the individual adapts to functioning within the disarray. This is not necessarily a sign of indifference, but a coping mechanism. The brain learns to filter out the constant stimuli to conserve energy. However, this adaptation can prevent the person from recognizing the impact the environment might be having on their subconscious emotional state or their daily efficiency. The mess persists because it has become invisible. The relationship between our homes and our emotions is deeply personal. For one person, a pile of books might represent intellectual curiosity and comfort. For another, it might signify procrastination and overwhelming choice. There is no single definition of what constitutes mess, nor is there a universal emotional reaction to it. Understanding why a space becomes cluttered often involves looking beyond the physical objects to the personal stories, emotions, and circumstances they represent. The state of a home is a dynamic narrative, a reflection of life as it is lived, with all its complexities and variations. Experiences differ between households, and the link between physical space and emotional well-being is unique to each individual's journey.